South Africa's official unemployment rate has risen to a new record high at 35.3%. That's a 0.4% increase, according to the fourth quarterly labor force survey. Tumisang Nldovu is standing by with the Statistician-general, and the number of persons who were employed increased to 262,000 to 14.5 million, and the number of unemployed persons also increased. Tumisang?
Indeed, Dudu, that's correct. South Africa's official unemployment rate now sitting at 35.3%, but there have been increases and decreases on the side of employment as well as unemployment. As you've indicated, we are joined here by the Statistician-general Risenga Maluleke just to get an even clearer picture of how we got here. Thank you so much for your time, Statistician-general. 35.3%, it is yet another increase in South Africa. You spoke about the effects of COVID-19 on the economy and that they were expected not to last as long as we are experiencing. How did we get to this yet another record high?
Well, the point is our job, Tumisang, is to always make numbers available to the public. Whether they go high or low, it's our job. But in this regard, we must look at unemployment. It has been steadily rising, coming out from about slightly above 25% unemployment rate in the last decade, all the way to where we are. So you ask me, COVID or no COVID, we have been seeing it rising. And where we are sitting now, as of the fourth quarter, we see that there were about 278,000 more people who got unemployed from the 7.6 million people who were not employed in the third quarter to now 7.9 million not employed. But when you look at unemployment, this 7.9 million are representative of the 35.3% that you have spoken about. But when you take the discouraged work seekers, who are 3.8 million, add them to the 7.9 million, as well as 800,000 more people who didn't look for employment for other reasons, not discouragement, but would have taken up employment had it been available. When you put them together, you come to 12.5 million people unemployed in the expanded definition, and that sits at 42.3%.
It's really a story of two sides with this particular reading of the QLFS for the fourth quarter, especially because while some industries that have been in decline have seen absorption of jobs, others, unfortunately, continue to decrease in terms of employment, and the likes of manufacturing as well as transport are one of those industries that are named in this report. Take us through really the contributing factors in terms of positive and negative.
Let us look at all these other industries have gone on the positive, largely private households. Where you and I leave people to assist in our gardens and in our kitchens. But when we look at manufacturing, for example, it has lost 85,000 jobs. There were other 25,000 jobs that were lost by the transport sector, the construction sector. And indeed, the construction sector has been depressed for quite some time. We also see utilities where we have water, electricity, and gas. We have also lost some jobs. So when you look at the total number of jobs, even when we have had gains, but when we do the additions, the total number of jobs that have been lost are sitting at 278,000. Furthermore, when you look at the number of your discouraged work seekers, we have declined by about 56,000, coming out of 3.9 in the previous quarter, 3.9 million, now sitting at 3.8 million people.
A decline with regards to the discouraged work seekers is a bit of a relief there, but youth unemployment is still at the largest in terms of a contributing factor to South Africa's unemployment figures. There's also that alarming rate of graduates that are without jobs. Where are we sitting in terms of the tally there?
Well, young people, especially those aged 15 to 24 years, are vulnerable to labor markets. Their unemployment rate is sitting slightly above 66%, And indeed, when you look at those not in employment, education or training, and I'm talking about young people aged 15 to 24 years here, those not in employment, education or training, they are sitting at about 3.4 million out of 10.2 million of that age cohort. Now, so whether you look at them from the side of the unemployment rate or from the side of not being in employment, education or training, they actually remain vulnerable. So are women, particularly black African women, who are going slightly in the excess of 42% versus the national average, that is sitting at 35.3%. So women generally, but particularly black African women, are vulnerable to labor markets as well.
We'll leave it there with the Statistician-general Risenga Maluleke talking to us about what analysts have correctly predicted, that increase in the official unemployment rate in South Africa, moving from 34.9% in the third quarter of last year and currently to sit at 35.3%. Dudu.
Tumisang, before we let you go, please, if the Statistician-general could indulge us or if you could help, what does it mean to be vulnerable to labor markets?
Very interesting question, Statistician General, if I may steal even a little bit more of your time, because Dudu Ramela, my colleague, is asking a pivotal one about what it means to be vulnerable in the South African economy and labor landscape. And already I'm thinking a barrier to entry when it comes to being able to access education, at the same time coming from a disadvantaged position within economic participation. That could be another serious one that goes into how we get to the numbers of a vulnerable individual here.
What happens is that we use ILO guidelines. And indeed, young people, the other issues that they don't have the right experience in terms of expertise and experience. That is number one, because our labor laws, before we even measure, allow us to start at the age of 15. If you are not at school, we don't classify you in the not economically active. If you're not at school and you have been looking for employment, you form part of the labor markets. Now, what is happening is that young people don't have the experience. That is the first thing. The second issue is as regards women, and we don't see it only on issues of employment. In all aspects of life, women, when it comes to poverty, they are hit the most. Women-headed households all over the country are the ones that experience hunger and the like. But also women don't have the freedom to move around in our country like men do. So there's a whole host of issues that come together in this vulnerability. But having said so, if you look at the different policies that have been put in the nation to focus particularly on women, I think we have seen movements, but generally this is a bit of an issue, particularly to black African women.
Absolutely. There we are talking about issues of structural inequality still in South Africa, Dudu, because if you even think at the side of the campaigns such as Fees Must Fall, that on its own is a barrier to entry within the higher education space. If you go into the labor market without that graduation, then it also speaks to a barrier of entry. What economy are you participating in that does not cultivate ground for you to be at least of green and sound and ready positioning to participate in it?
Makes sense. Thank you very much, Tumisang Nldovu, for that comprehensive update and interview with the Statistician General. We also speak to a labor analyst, Tony Healy, at about 1:15 today on the back of the release of those numbers.